It's Friday, May 13th. Let's talk PlayStation. Alright, I love you guys, but I'm going to level with you. I'm going to rush through this episode purely so I can play more Uncharted 4 before I have to go to work tomorrow. So, you're just going to have to deal. Anyway, let's do our first news story, which is Crash Bandicoot, because it's always nice to talk about these every once in a while. Without, of course, spoiling anything whatsoever, spoiler alert right now, slightly, for Uncharted 4. I won't even get into too much detail. Basically, there's a point in Uncharted 4, which I'm sure a lot of you already know at some point, because it's a little fairly early on in the game, so a lot of you probably already know what I'm talking about. But there's basically a very interesting Crash Bandicoot cameo, Easter egg sort of situation in Uncharted 4, and pretty much every player runs into this. It's part of the story, which is, of course, sparking a large interest in if Crash Bandicoot is going to return. Of course, this actually came out. This news story is probably upwards of 2 weeks old now because of all the, Uncharted 4 coverage as of recently. And of course, I didn't even want to look at it or see it or anything like that because I wanted to have like a little media blackout for myself for the game so I could enjoy it when I played it, and was thus thoroughly surprised when I saw this. But regardless, we're talking about it now because, like I said, this has sparked new interest in Crash Bandicoot. People are going, oh, is Crash Bandicoot going to come back? Blah, 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 blah. You know how this news story always goes every time with Crash Bandicoot. Basically, Sony's Adam Boyes responded on Twitter, once again confirming Activision still owns Crash Bandicoot. He even kind of almost got a little antsy with the tone of the tweet, basically saying, yes, I've already said this before. I'm sure Sony gets tired of having to constantly answer this question over and over again. I'm sure at this point they're just trying to condition people into this sort of perspective where it's like, guys, we just enjoy Crash Bandicoot. We're big fans of it. We like, being nostalgic about it. Let us be nostalgic about it and stop, speculating if it's going to come back, because it's not, because we don't own it and we can't do anything with it if Activision doesn't want to do anything with it. And you also got to figure if Activision does still own the rights to this game and they can do anything what they want with it, and they're seeing all this consumer interest in Crash Bandicoot, you're probably wondering, why doesn't Activision finally do something with it? Kind of poses an interesting question there. There's always that little scenario where it's like, even if Sony is doing something with Crash Bandicoot, they're obviously not going to tell people about it. They're not going to tell you, oh yeah, we got the rights back and everything, because then that would ruin the surprise. So, But at this point, I'm absolutely of the mind where it's just like, give it up. This game's not coming back in any sort of meaningful capacity, at least anytime soon. For our final few news stories, because there's really not a whole lot going on, been a bit of a quiet news week. Sony won NPD for April, no surprise there. Once again, PlayStation 4, did well. There's all this Uncharted 4 news going around and stuff, reviews and whatnot for the game. Again, so it's kind of a quiet news week, mostly. So for the rest of this episode, we're going to be talking about PS4K, PS4.5, whatever you want to call this thing, PS4 NEO. So the one news story we got is regarding if this thing's going to be releasing anytime soon, and basically a new report came out from, I believe, VR World or something. They kind of went into detail about how AMD had their investor meeting or something. I forget exactly what it was. They had an investor discussion or whatnot about their how they're going to basically increase growth, revenue, and things like that in the future. And one of AMD's points on their little board, on their little discussion, is that they're going to be having semi-custom hardware in 2016, and basically the second half of 2016. Which is kind of telling us that we're possibly going to see this, theoretical announcement at least before October. So that's basically what we're looking at right now, is that this thing will probably get announced relatively soon. Keep in mind the NX also falls in there, so that could absolutely be a situation too, but Nintendo's already been pretty forward about, when they're going to announce their hardware. So, but either way, that's essentially what, AMD kind of hinted at more or less, and that's kind of what we've been thinking of so far. Actually, they're thinking probably before TGS before TGS or at TGS is when they'll probably announce the next, this mid-cycle PS4. Now let's talk a little bit about some publisher perspective on this PS4 NEO idea. So basically, EA CFO Blake Jorgensen, I think that's how you say his name, was discussing about the possible idea of this, and of course he basically flat out said, well, we don't know anything, more or less, we don't know what Sony's doing, we don't know what Microsoft's doing. But he had a couple of interesting quotes I wanted to read you guys, more or less saying that the company's ready to handle how anything goes regarding say a mid-cycle refresh. He said, I can't tell you a lot about what Microsoft or Sony or the other console makers are planning. In terms of any mid-cycle upgrades, once again, I can't predict. But what I can tell you is that what was heard, I think, publicly from the console makers is they're releasing that the compatibility issue across consoles is an important consumer issue. And as Microsoft has shown, they've tried to do this with some backwards compatibility on older titles and new titles. I think that's going to be an important part of what a mid-cycle might look like if there is one, which removes a lot of the risk associated with what we've seen historically with console cycles. We don't spend a lot of time worrying about it because we feel like our ability to develop for whatever new technology comes, the risks of that's been minimized because we've moved toward one single engine. I just got a text message, excuse me. Frostbite, and we're able to port that to whatever platform or point that to, I'm totally butchering this now, to whatever platform is evolving or is upgraded. He's more or less saying exactly the kind of sentiments I've always been echoing, which is that the compatibility thing is the big key thing here. You can't do this idea of a mid-cycle refresh if you don't have compatibility in mind. Sony definitely knows that, and even on the Microsoft side, again, Microsoft side, it's a bit of a light rumor in terms of if they're going to do the mid-cycle refresh, but at least on the Sony side, and that, earlier that report from a few weeks ago regarding how Sony's doing this with developers and whatnot, and basically telling developers that they're being very strict about the compatibility thing and making sure that their game is playable on both platforms. There's nothing exclusive to the stronger PS4 except, say, higher resolution, frame rate, and graphical fidelity. The key thing here is compatibility, and if you get that in line, you can make this idea of two separate consoles that are, have power disparity to live healthfully on the market. Because if you got a situation where one plays games and one doesn't, you're screwing everybody. That's where it's all going to fall short, and that's where it's always fallen short. That's where it's always fallen short historically. The forward compatibility thing, I keep saying it. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing about it, but that's totally what it is, man. And lastly, EA's Peter Moore made some comments about the future of consoles, and his were actually quite different. He more or less said, "I'm not sure there will be consoles as we know them anymore. Games will be accessed by streaming technology, so we don't need hardware intermediaries in between the two. If you and I want to play Battlefield 12 against each other, we'll just jump into a game via whatever monitor we happen to have in our homes. It'll be on a chip rather than in a box." He's basically saying, oh, streaming is like the way to go. Like that's where he's possibly looking at it. And I would have to assume, because obviously the guy's a smart man. The guy's works at a multi-million-dollar corporation in the games business, so certainly his comments hold a little bit of strength. I would assume he's saying that in regards to like the long-term future, like I don't even know, you know what I'm saying, like 10, 15 years from now, it's got to be pretty far out. Even then, but even 10, 15 years, I'm thinking to myself, like, we're probably still going to be playing on consoles. We're probably still going to be playing locally stored boxes. And the thing is, a lot of people, a lot of consumers, of course, absolutely feel this way because streaming is just not necessarily the most ideal way to play video games. And home internet connection is a big thing. I mean, a shitload of homes across the entire planet cannot sustain a strong enough internet connection to stream their games. And I mean, I would assume from EA as a publisher, they want their games to be accessible in most homes. So I'm not entirely sure why they'd want that sort of direction to go. And he's not even sort of saying that he wants it to go that way, just that that's how he feels that it will turn into at some point. But I've always been of the mind where it's like if streaming is at some point going to be a big role in games, it's not going to be for a long time. People always underestimate how long traditional consoles have, how long physical media have in this entertainment industry, but it is probably going to hold for much longer than people think, especially since we now have this new idea of mid-cycle refreshes, more frequently released consoles, and if anything, that should be the way to go because, again, it's a compatibility thing. It just is going to make it a hell of a lot easier. It's just, if anything, that's like the most consumer-friendly way to sort of go. Even more so, I mean, if you don't believe it in that way, I mean, look at it this way. When does Sony ever talk about the success of PlayStation Now? They never fucking do. You know why? Because they probably aren't seeing good numbers from PlayStation Now. They're probably embarrassing. More often than not, when a major company has a sort of product, a service, or something like that, and they're not talking numbers, that's not good. They have not divulged subscriber numbers on it. They've not just disclosed how much money they've made off the platform. It's PlayStation Now is probably not doing that well for Sony, and understandably so. People just aren't really, that's not their first way to jump into games. And for a lot of PlayStation 4 only people, that's the only way for them to say play a PlayStation 3 game. And they're not talking numbers because people probably just aren't using it. So we probably got a long time with traditional consoles. Anyway, those are just some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. No Ryan on Gaming because I finally uploaded the Ratchet & Clank review, so go and see that. I did review Ratchet & Clank for PlayStation 4. Surprise, surprise, it's a very good game. I know a lot of people love when I do review videos. I've said countless times now, I mean, if you want me to do more of them, it's just kind of hard to justify. They take up a lot of time. You know, I'm not GameSpot or IGN where I have, you know, editors to do them for me, to write my script for me. Multiple people do those videos. I'm just one person that does my reviews, so they take a little longer for me. Which, speaking of reviews, I will be doing an Uncharted 4 review. Obviously, it's a big game. You can't not, you know, talk about that game in any sort of meaningful aspect. So yes, I will be reviewing Uncharted 4. Same deal with Ratchet & Clank. I'm going to need time, especially, you know, because Uncharted's a fairly long video game. Much longer than the past Uncharted. So, you know, I got work too, so I need to, you know, take my time with it and do what I need to do, which you guys understand that. You don't give a shit, so thank you. But that will be coming at some point. No clue when. Other than that, I guess I got nothing. I'm going to end this episode so I can edit this and then start playing some Uncharted 4, which, by the way, sorry if there's a major news story that breaks out, you know, just a few hours later that I didn't talk about. I'm recording this not super early, but early enough for me to at least play the game a little bit before I got to go to bed. So, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I'll see you guys next Friday.